What's up, fight fans? It's your man 3K the Boss, aka Mr. Two Hands Up. You know what it is. Hey man, I was just thinking about something as I was just sitting here on the couch. Last night when I was watching the PBC event, Adam Kalnagi and Chris Arreola was the main card with Marcus Brown and John Pascal. On the undercard, John Pascal beat Marcus Brown. Like PBC is just awful. But anyway, they didn't recognize the WBO heavyweight belt. Yeah, like they didn't recognize the WBO heavyweight belt at all. And I tried to go back, pull up the Arreola fight to see where I could find it on the when they were saying it during the commercial break, but I just couldn't find it, and I wasn't going to keep scrolling through it. But anybody who watched their fight, you know what I'm talking about. When they talk about the two heavyweight champions, they said Andy Ruiz was the WBA IBF champion, with no mention of the WBO. So why would they do something like that? This regime in boxing is getting so out of control that you don't even recognize the WBO. I mean, that's one of the oldest sanctioning bodies in boxing. It's older than the WBC. I've never heard anything like this in my life. And I truly believe that it absolutely started when Terrence Crawford, now that Terrence Crawford is a threat to the 147 division, and people are starting to put their foot on the necks of the PBC about the Terrence Crawford-Errol Spence fight and why that fight can't be made to happen. And honestly, the walls are closing in because once Pacquiao and Spence fight, once Pacquiao and Spence fight, and once the smoke clears between Sean Porter and Errol Spence, you guys aren't really going to have much to do over there. I mean, you can recycle some guys at 147, but there's no other championship bouts and there's no other unification fight other than the Terrence Crawford fight. But now you just completely disavow the WBO. You're basically trying to say that what Terrence Crawford holds isn't even a full percentage of a title, which is absolutely crazy. So if we're not going to recognize or organize a body such as the WBO, and that's basically the games that the PBC are playing, and it's a really distasteful thing to do, considering that you have fans and boxing public, and it should be a right that people know who are the heavyweights in that class to differentiate who is the top dog and who isn't, based upon body of work, based upon who holds what belts, etc., etc. So if you're going to blow off the WBO and treat them like they're not even an organization, like their belt holds no value, like you're basically treating it like the IBO, then what does that say about your regime in boxing? And also, if this is the type of distasteful behavior that the PBC and the disrespect that the PBC is going to show to other sanctioning bodies in the sport, then the PBC just needs to remove themselves from all ranking systems, remove themselves from even being mentioned with the other stables in the sport, and just go ahead and make their own little fucking World Wrestling Federation boxing title and go put themselves on an island, and they should just do business with those guys and the guys that are on, the PBC's roster. Because if that's the case, y'all are just straight obliterating what a sanctioning body, y'all are just basically obliterating the WBO name by absolutely ignoring them and treating them like they aren't there because you work hand in hand with the WBC. And they giving you this moniker by running around saying that the WBC is the most prestigious belt, the green belt, when it's not the oldest sanctioning body in the sport. But regardless of the situation, another question that I would have to ask, because I'm sitting here, I'm pondering, and I'm thinking about all of this distasteful shit. How would Andy Ruiz feel to know that the belt that he went into Madison Square Garden, took on a guy that was basically boogeyman in the whole sport. Nobody wanted to get in the ring, which is Anthony Joshua, as we all know. Stops him, knocks him down 4 times, takes all of his belts, and he was in possession of the green belt, the brown belt, the red belt, and the black belt. I'm sure it probably, grinds his gears to know that y'all are just treating another sanctioning body such as the WBO belt and the prestige that the WBO Super holds as it sits around his waist. Y'all are just pushing it to the side and treating it like it isn't anything, because in my mind the WBO Super holds a lot of prestige. It actually, in my mind, the WBO Super holds more prestige than the WBC, considering how many WBC belts are just given out. You got the Pearl belt, you got the Rust belt, you got the Diamond belt, you got the Franchise belt, you got the Mayan belt, you got the Gold belt, you got the Silver belt, you got the Intercontinental green belt. Like, the list just never stops. Also, since you've been accustomed to just shunning away other sanctioning bodies and treating other organizations as if they don't exist, and exalting the green belt, and putting it above everything else, I think this is going to be a trend that continues. So if it goes to the WBC, then the IBF is going to go, considering they're the most strict of the sanctioning bodies, but you're going to have to fucking move them out and try to get those guys out of the way. Then your credibility, then you're going to do the same thing with the WBA. But I'm sure, there's something, you have some sort of agreement with the sanctioning bodies that you mentioned, or you just have a better rapport, and you're just not going to mention it at all. Basically, these gentlemen, the PBC, Showtime, and Fox, are starting to become a cancer to the sport, and they are truly starting to become a threat to all sanctioning bodies and organizations. Now, it's not an individual that is on their roster that truly makes them a threat, because to be perfectly honest, the two most powerful fighters in boxing happen to be a part of the DAZN regime. But what I'm saying is they could start to become a threat is because when they're recognized as Fox is truly a powerhouse, considering it gets its viewership out to the world. If you've got a whole bunch of cancerous, boxing normies, guys that never watch fights, guys that really don't know fighters in the sport, if they're clinging on to what they see in the PBC, and if the PBC gets a hold of a majority of the belts and other classes, then they could necessarily become a cancerous problem. But we're just not going to disavow other franchises, because as I've stated, man, these guys are the cancer of boxing. And another thing, considering that Andy Ruiz, once again, is a stablemate, he is under the PBC banner. What professional, what guy who loves the sweet science and loves just the pure essence of boxing is going to stand by and be a champion while you're not recognizing 2 of the 4 belts he's holding? No heavyweight in boxing will stand by while you're just basically telling the belt that he worked his ass off doesn't even exist. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Once again, PBC are up to more bullshit. And as we always say, it costs you nothing. You pay a nigga no mind. Respect.